Let's discuss a little bit. I want to bring in a panel right now. CNN legal analyst Mark O'Mara, criminal defense attorney Laura Coates, a CNN legal analyst, former federal prosecutor and former Washington, D.C. assistant U.S. attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. Also here, CNN law enforcement analyst Matthew Horace, a former ATF executive. Laura, let me start with you here. We're talking about this video. The police chief says he'll only release it if there's a compelling reason to do so. As you look at this, is there a compelling reason left not to do so?
No, they have every reason to release the footage. But if you are the police chief who previously held a press conference and said, here's what happened after viewing the videotape, and it's completely opposite of what the family has said, and now we're revealing that actually it's inconclusive. They're trying to carry on the narrative they earlier said, and that's not the reason to avoid transparency. It's not about the investigation coming undone. It's about a PR issue they're facing. And keep in mind, John and Kate, you guys know there is a law coming into effect in a few days that will prevent you from releasing any footage barring a court order, and the chief's statements track the language of that statute now.
Mark, I want to get your take. From your perspective, do you think it should be released? And what do you think is going on with the decision to not release at this point?
Well, the idea of keeping the integrity of the investigation sacrosanct is very necessary, very important, and it's good police procedure, no question about it. But that's really 10 or 15 years ago. We now live in a immediate satisfaction society because of everything, social media and whatnot. And I agree with what was just said. If we're going to have somebody like the chief basically narrate through what happened and in effect give a slightly their version of it, then now, as long as we can guarantee that the integrity is not going to be compromised, that witnesses will not see that video and then change their testimony, now it is time to release the video, get it out the way we need to at least allow the public, the people who truly have a public interest in what's happening, yet this case and many other similar cases, let's get it out and get it viewed. The problem that I have, we now know it's going to be inconclusive and it's not going to give us great answers. And now what's going to happen is everyone's going to focus on the video, and actually the entirety of the investigation is what's going to be most important. All the witnesses, all of the statements, the cop statements, other videos, and get it all at one time. We're not going to want to wait that long, but that is how the investigation is supposed to take.
And that's exactly right, because in fact, the police chief and the family, they're not diametrically opposed, right? The police chief made clear that when he looked at the video, he never saw Scott pointing the gun. And the family said, well, look, they never even saw whether or not he had a gun, and it looked like he was walking away. That's what they said, not in opposition. They just saw very different things. But what about Mark's point, Matt, here, that the police chief also says it's the other evidence, everything else he knows, that leads him to believe that those police officers felt threatened. Will he have to come forward if this video does go public? He'll have to come forward pretty quickly and tell us what that evidence is or what those witnesses said.
Well, you would think that that is the case, but remember, we have two distinct issues here. One, the optics of the situation, which is driving a lot of the protests and a lot of the public sentiment, and then we have the facts. And no one knows the facts except for the investigators, and the facts are emerging day by day. So they need to craft a message that quiets public interest. They need to craft a message that's honest and candid, but we also need to protect the investigation at the same time.
Well, see, that's the issue when you talk about crafting the message. The facts are going to be static in time. And you're talking about the officers are trying to promote transparency and say, listen, here's what we know in this closed universe of facts. Now, they have eyewitnesses, and one of them is the wife of Mr. Scott, who was present on the scene. We have not heard her testimony, obviously, and other eyewitnesses. There is a developing story. But whether to actually disclose the footage is a separate inquiry, whether you have a beyond a reasonable doubt trial or an indictment pending. What you have here is this is fixed in time, release the footage, and the reason to withhold it is only about public relations, not about the integrity of an investigation at this point.
Mark, I think we're going to be watching this press conference start right now. That's the mayor of Charlotte. Let's listen in.
Good morning. And thank you for being here. I want to thank our...
The protests didn't happen in Uptown. They were there, they were spontaneous, and there are businesses all over that we have to protect. So the curfew has to affect all businesses that could be vulnerable.
How long do you anticipate?
All right, we've been listening right there to officials in Charlotte, North Carolina, the mayor, Jennifer Roberts, the police chief, Kerr Putney, right there giving a recap of the latest that they have for the public on the investigation into the police shooting death of Keith Lamont Scott. The police chief and the mayor saying this is handed over to the state at this point, which meant the state is gathering information, re-interviewing witnesses, and reinforcing the point that they will not be releasing the video that protesters have been calling for.
Yeah, if it comes out, it'll be the state that releases it, not the chief and the mayor. A couple other quick points there. 3 arrests last night as compared to 44 the night before. But significantly, the arrest of a man now charged with killing that man, shooting and killing that man who died in the protest, Justin Carr, who was shot Wednesday night. So they now have a suspect in custody that they are charging with his death. I want to bring back our panel to discuss what we just heard. Laura Coates, let me first go to you here. The state now has to make the decision. You heard from the mayor there who says she would love to be transparent. She would love this video to come out, but it has to happen in time. The police chief says, I want the video to come out as well, but it has to happen at the right time. Do you think the state may decide that that right time is now?
Well, it's a little bit of a punt, right, that they were doing. I wish I could help you, but I can't now that I've tied my own hands. But when the state has taken over now, it will restart the investigation clock, essentially, because they're going to have to re-interview who the officers in the state-level police department did. They have to gather information and decide what's already been gathered, whether it's credible for them to continue with their investigation or not. So it tolls it in a way. I think they are not going to release it anytime soon until they have retraced the steps of the police officers. And in that respect, I think that people in Charlotte will be a little bit more convinced about transparency because they have an independent entity other than the police force doing it. But they still demand the video now. I think they're entitled to it based on the different narratives.
Motivations aside, though, Mark, what Laura just said, does that make the police chief's point when he said one piece of evidence will never make a good case? I could hurt things, inflame things more if I put it out. Did he convince you?
Well, we can look at it this way. If it was the police who just released the picture showing what seems to be a gun on the floor, then a certain segment would be very upset that that's what was let out. And if we showed a picture of where the gunshot actually entered his body, then another segment would be upset. I do agree that now that the state has it, they are going to take their time. They're going to be less concerned about the transparency that the mayor is concerned about within their own city, and they're going to make sure that they focus on and maintain the integrity of the investigation. And by the way, long term, I think that's a much better solution to it all, even though we don't have that immediate satisfaction we want. We can look back at Ferguson and remember that they took a long time to come out with their investigation, and when they did, they dumped everything. But the frustrations that happened in Ferguson were they were letting out snippets of information that frustrated certain segments. So in one sense, we're being cautious here with that history of Ferguson and many other cases of doing it the right way. So although we're going to have to wait, I think the wait will be worth it. That we'll have a complete investigation. If charges come, there'll be a reason for them. If charges don't come, there'll be a reason for it.
I should say, I believe the governor, Pat McCrory, is going to hold a news conference later today where he may face questions about what he intends to do or what he would suggest to do with the video. So there might be some clarity there. Matt Horace, quickly, the curfew. The mayor signed orders for a curfew between midnight and 6 a.m. Now, the police chief didn't actually impose it last night, right? He let the protesters stay out on the streets after midnight because they were largely peaceful. But I got the sense from both the mayor and the chief that they're concerned about the weekend ahead. I mean, weekends can be different animals when you're talking about this type of thing. They may be concerned that the protests could flare up again. Do you think that they may actually enforce that curfew tonight?
I think they'll only enforce it if they're pushed to. The chief made it very clear it is a curfew, but it's a soft curfew. They're going to do whatever they can to build that trust between community and police and make sure that protesters know that they can do whatever they want within the confines of the law.
Yeah, there was progress last night. The police chief complimenting protesters as well as commending the work of the law enforcement involved in keeping the peace. Guys, thank you so much. We'll be following this a lot.